I can consider that 3 generations of your family came here, and that can be a factor, but I can't consider your background and who you are.
Yeah, they can, because the 6 conservative justices on the Supreme Court will let them do it, because they don't actually think the diversity is important.
Hi, everybody. Auntie speaks. Welcome back. We're going to talk about affirmative action. My favorite subject, because it's before the court. And of course, those evil conservative Republicans are racist because they want to overturn affirmative action. Now, what does Auntie Speaks feel about affirmative action? I hate it. And I hate it with a passion. Why do I hate it? Am I a racist? Well, actually, no. I was an affirmative action hire. That is why I hate it. So I've been in the business world for a very, very long time. And when I started out my career, that was longer than I want to admit, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, 35. It was a while back. So in the industry that I had chosen, which is a scientific industry, it was very unusual for females to be in those positions. And when I got my job, I thought I was super awesome because I was 22 or something like that, straight out of college, and I was handed a multi-million-dollar territory to take care of. So I thought I was really, really cool. Come to find out later on that everybody around me didn't think it was cool. And the reason why they didn't think it was cool, because they were pretty sure that I got my job because I was a female. And now that I'm older and I know more stuff, I know that that is most definitely why I got my job. Most definitely. I was the only female in my position in a very, very large company. Now, why would I hate affirmative action if it got me my first job? Well, let me tell you, I had to work my tail end off to prove everyone wrong, to prove that I wasn't just an affirmative action hire. Now, if I hadn't been the person that I was, I would have gotten probably pretty resentful about the whole process. So I hate affirmative action. I hate what it does to the person who's getting affirmative action. And I hate what it does to everybody around you, because nobody knows if you really belong where you are or not. And that creates resentment. And that's why I truly believe we have so many problems around race and sex right now, is because of this resentment. So let's take a look at this Supreme Court case. And we're going to look at Joy Reid because she's so much fun. And in my personal opinion, one of the largest racists out there. But hey, let's see what she has to say.
The Supreme Court appears poised to put an end to affirmative action, the precedent that allows colleges to consider a student's race in admissions, and something universities say is essential to assuring diversity on campus. To perhaps no one's surprise, the court's 6 conservative justices expressed deep skepticism of the program. Justice Clarence Thomas, who benefited from affirmative action to be admitted to Yale Law School, but then repudiated the practice that helped pave the way for him to literally be on the court and never stop complaining about how he felt diminished by it.
Why would he feel diminished by it? Does that sound so funny, Joy, that he feels diminished by it? Well, it's just like me. People look at you weird. And if they look at you weird, there's nothing that you can do. Even if you were good enough to get that position, people will think that you weren't.
Asked affirmative action defenders a seemingly absurd question, particularly coming from him. He asked how diversity benefits education.
I didn't go to racially diverse schools, but there were educational benefits. They send them there to learn physics or chemistry or whatever they're studying. So tell me what the educational benefits are.
Huh?
Are you confused, Joy? Are you confused? Why are you confused? Why is that not a valid question? What are the educational benefits of diversity? I think that's a rather valid question.
Is that about how the arguments went on the right, Yamiche? Clarence Thomas saying, I didn't see any benefit to having diversity.
That is basically how these arguments went. At one point, Justice Thomas asked, well, what exactly is diversity? Explain it to me. And then other justices asked questions like, well, why should race at all be something that even a student should check their box, even if they want to voluntarily give it to you? Why should that matter at all?
That's an interesting question. Why would the justices ask you to describe diversity? Why? Well, if you didn't know, most people on the right do not care about skin color. We don't. We don't think it adds value or detracts from any one person. It is just your nationality, or it is just your skin color. It doesn't tell you anything about you as a person. What conservatives are most concerned about is diversity of thought. We think that is valuable. Maybe diversity of experiences. I think colleges should let in people who had to really struggle through life. Like if you have two people with a 4.0 GPA and SAT scores or ACT scores, which are the same, but one comes from poverty and had to, work their whole life, that person should get in versus that rich kid. So yeah, that's why we would ask about diversity, because we don't care about diversity of color. We don't think that it's important. Who's the racist?
Ketanji Brown Jackson brought up a really important point, which is why should legacy, meaning your grandparents and your parents who went to the schools, maybe like UNC and Harvard, why should that matter more than if someone is saying, well, my grandparents were enslaved and as a result, I want to get into the school to honor their memory. There was a real contentious back and forth on that. But this was in some ways one of the biggest days at the Supreme Court because we could see the end of affirmative action as we know it, Joy.
That is a good point by Justice Brown. I don't think that schools should take that into account. They do. Why? Because it's called endowments. So if your parents have given millions and millions of dollars to the school, then, you get a leg up. I'm sorry. You know what that's called? It's called capitalism. Is it right? Maybe not. But their parents are sustaining the school.
I mean, we likely will. I have the Ketanji sound, just as Yamiche just mentioned. Let's listen.
As I understand your no race conscious admissions rule, these two applicants would have a dramatically different opportunity to tell their family stories and to have them count. The first applicant would be able to have his family background considered and valued by the institution as a part of its consideration of whether or not to admit him, while the second one wouldn't be able to because his story is in many ways bound up with his race and with the race of his ancestors.
All right, I take it back. I thought Justice Brown was making a good point, but she's not. Okay. Can we stop this? The black students applying for Harvard do not have any relationship to slavery. And 9 times out of 10, they're from upper middle class to rich parents. There have been studies of the people that are going to Harvard. So you can write an essay that says, I am still traumatized by my great-great-great-grandfather being sold into slavery. The Irish immigrant could say the same thing. They were basically considered black people and they were indentured servants and slaves right along with the slaves. You didn't know that, did you? Yeah. Indentured servitude. Yeah, look it up. Yeah, the first slave holder in the United States was actually a black man. You didn't know that? Oh. Okay, but could we stop it? Stop pretending that has anything to do with who you are today. And that's not what affirmative action is today. If it was an essay where you're writing that you've had a really, really tough life and you've had to go against all these hardships to get to Harvard, Harvard would definitely take that into account. That's not what's happening today. You are getting a 400 or 300 point advantage if you're African American. The same if you're Hispanic. I think it's a little bit less. I think it's 200 points if you're Hispanic. And you are being doxxed if you are Asian. You're getting like, you have to get like 200 points higher than everybody else. That is not the same as taking into account someone's family history or something that they personally had to overcome. Those are the students that you want, those that have personally overcome, not people who have slaves in their ancestry. If it's people who have slaves in their ancestry, my God, we'd all get into Harvard. Because every single one of us on the face of the planet probably had some of our relative enslaved in the past. I hate to tell you this, but that was the way of the world.
I can consider that 3 generations of your family came here, and that can be a factor, but I can't consider your background and who you are.
Yeah, they can, because the 6 justices, conservative justices on the Supreme Court will let them do it, because they don't actually think the diversity is important.
Ellie, because what's being used here are Asian Americans to try to pit Asian American college admittees against Black college attendees. You've tweeted a lot about this and the disingenuousness. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so the Asian American argument has been co-opted by these white-wing people who have wanted for their entire careers to see affirmative action taken down. And you saw that because over 5 hours of Supreme Court argument, they never made the one-to-one connection for how affirmative action leads to discrimination against Asian Americans. In the North Carolina case, literally Ryan Park, the Solicitor General, said that you can't make that argument because North Carolina admits a higher percentage of Asian American students than Black students. It would be peculiar, he had said, to use that as an evidence for discrimination. In the Harvard case, it's a little bit different. I think there actually are legitimate ways where you can argue that Asian Americans have been discriminated against by Harvard University because they use a particular statistic called personal rating, which disadvantages Asian Americans.
We can use your family history, but we can't use your family background and where you came from. Okay, that is the most ridiculous argument I think I have ever heard. If you are Black in the United States today and you are of college age, I submit that you do not know what racism is. Because we need to take a magnifying glass to find the racism of today. You have not experienced harsh treatment because you're Black. 9 times out of 10, you are favored because you are Black or Hispanic or a woman, which I fit into. And I think that's just as wrong as looking at someone who's Black and giving them favoritism and looking at someone who's Hispanic and giving them favoritism, and then taking someone who is Asian and giving them a penalty. And then this last bit. Asian Americans have not been hurt. Are you kidding me? We all know what they do to Asian students who want to get into the best schools. We all know it. And North Carolina gave this crazy argument saying, well, they have a higher percentage of Asians who come to North Carolina than African Americans. So that proves we're not being racist. Okay, that doesn't prove anything. If you didn't have those strictures in place, there'd be even more Asians, and we all know it. Okay, why do conservatives hate affirmative action? Well, number one, it is against the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You are judging people on the color of their skin, and that is wrong. It was wrong when it was done in the 1800s. It was wrong when it was done in the 1960s, and it is wrong today. Wrong. But even worse, it hurts those you are trying to help. It hurts them. And who am I going to have to explain this? I'm going to bring in the God himself, Thomas Sowell. Oh, Thomas Sowell. He is awesome. If you don't know who Thomas Sowell is, he is the smartest bulb in the bunch. We're going to have Thomas Sowell end this out. Why does affirmative action hurt the people that it's trying to help?
United States. You talked about affirmative action, and you came up with some statistics, and I wanted to ask you about. You said that at the University of California at Berkeley, for example, where the entering freshman class has been described as, quote, wonderfully diverse, unquote, because the, quote, class closely reflects the actual ethnic distribution of California high school students. these are your words, more than 70% of black students fail to graduate.
Yes.
Why?
Because they're mismatched with Berkeley. That is, these students, the average black student at Berkeley is above the national average on test scores. It's just that the average white student is further above the national average, and the average Asian student further above than the white students. And so in that atmosphere, these students who have every qualification to succeed are artificially turned into failures. And the only beneficiary of that is the University of California at Berkeley. Because what they've effectively done is rented these bodies for window dressing for a few years. And then when they're through with them, they're put aside. A new bunch of bodies are brought in. At MIT, the average black student is at the top 10% nationwide in mathematics, and in the bottom 10% at MIT. And 1/4 of them don't make it. Now, when you realize how few black students at that level, to lose 1/4 of them, you can't afford that.
You say it doesn't work. What would you tell the school to do?
To admit students on the basis of their qualifications.
Way to go, Dr. Sowell. They rent the bodies. I put this clip in another video, but that was when I was just starting, so I thought it deserved another look at. You are mismatching students to schools, and you are creating failures. You are creating a failure. So who are you helping other than those white administrators who want to have a quote-unquote diverse campus? Instead of going to Harvard, they could go to Penn, and they would be just great in that school and get straight A's, but you had them go to Harvard, so they failed. Okay, guys, I think you know where I stand. I hate affirmative action. It needs to go away. So please like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate all the support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.